Hello, folks. Welcome back to Exploring Multimedia Art with Pd-L2Ork. I'm your host, Dr. Lawrence W. Moore. In the beginning of this second series, we started off with GEM, the graphics environment for multimedia that is an external for PD in general, and it comes with Pd-L2Ork, the flavor that we're highlighting in this series. And we looked at particles. Particles are very useful in creating moving structures that, of course, in Pd-L2Ork being a multimedia environment, you can then have this moving video structure system, something that could be subject to your audio inputs. So what I've been doing is I've been working on some things, trying to find a way to make some great visualizations for my music. And I know a lot of people are interested in that. And so I've been exploring that possibility with the particle systems in GEM using Pd-L2Ork. And we're going to pick up where we left off and focus on some things that I'm actually kind of excited about. That is the gravity feature, the orbit feature, and the render feature that you can apply to particles and do some pretty cool things. So, without further ado, we're going to get on to that. Okay, so here we are. To the left, you see the patch I've loaded up. I'm going to do a quick review of what I have here. It's all based on the material from last time, but it deserves a little bit of a quick review. We start at the top here, of course. Top left corner is our create and destroy for the gem window. Don't forget, those of you, if you are going to make this patch, if you don't have the gem libraries loaded automatically, you do need to make an object here that's declare -lib gem. Gem with a capital G, lowercase e, and m. If you've been following the series, you know exactly what I mean. We have a toggle box on the gem head, so this could be turned on and off. Yep. There we go. On, off. So anyway, that is basically powering the whole gem list here. And then there is a part head. Part underscore head is an object that we learned about last time. It's something that's required for particle systems. Things in GEM have their own head for a list of objects that make stuff happen. And when you're doing particle systems, there is kind of like a subhead that you need to make that's called part head. And part head can be sent speed values that I'm going to zoom in here. When I do, you will see an extra mouse cursor appear. The large one is actually me. The other one is a result of the magnifier, so please bear with me on that. So here, a load bang is sending 100, I believe 100. Sometimes I see multiple zeros. Yes, 100 into a number box, into a multiplier, multiplying it by 0.01. This gives me more resolution that when I move these numbers in the number box, I can adjust the speed. I'm going to zoom out so you can see the effect of doing that. But multiplying by 0.01 gives me a little more resolution. You see, I can drag up and drag down and alter the values here with more control. If I didn't have the times 0.01 and wasn't using a number box, basically what would happen? Well, in using the number box, when you scroll on it, it scrolls by integers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And when you scroll, it tends to move a little fast. And jumping through those numbers too quickly gives you less control over the values in between and the overall speed that you're getting in, trying to control the speed here. But in any case, that goes into a message box where the $1 gets replaced by the number value coming in. So you're saying speed and a number to particle head so that it can produce what it's going to produce. As far as speed is concerned, and the speed is kind of like, it's kind of like a frame rate, but I don't know that it's that. It's basically how fast the rendering of the particle system is operating. There's other factors that control speed, as you'll see here. Part source, that means how many particles are generated in the system per frame. By default, GEM runs at 25 frames per second, according to the documentation. And, by sending information like a message, I believe it's frames and then a number, to GEM-Win, you can change your frame rate that GEM operates at. Now, that's video frame rate, so obviously you want to not necessarily control speed of particles that way, because your frame may be important for the video that you're projecting or recording or working with within GEM. So that will govern the frame rate that you want to have. And this governs basically how many particles you want generated by the frame at the frame rate. I have it by default here set to 5, but I put a number box here so that I can increase that. For example, 5, 10, 20, 50, 100. So you see a lot more particles are now being generated, and we get a bigger field of particles basically. And as we talked about last time, that part source also has after the initial argument of how many particles are going to be created per frame, you could put in a domain, which is kind of like a shape of the source, although I was having trouble seeing how that shape really was affected. And then after that, coordinates, which is based on the shape. Now, by default, it's set to sphere and then XYZ coordinates afterwards, kind of like velocity is here below. So that's why I didn't put any in. It's like, okay, we'll start at 0, 0, 0, 0 X coordinate, 0 Y coordinate, and in a spherical way, those particles are being emanated. Now, the way these particles flow is also then governed by part velocity here. And I put in creation arguments for that. And that is sphere, kind of radiating outwards in a sphere shape. Velocity is kind of more like, I wouldn't say so much the destination, but where the particles are flying to, so to speak. And then you can govern it a little bit by X, Y, and Z coordinates. I have 0 for X and 1 for Y. That's why we're seeing a thicker amount of particles flying upwards, because in GEM, Y would be right about here. Remember, a lot of the locations and size and different factors in GEM are done by units, where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tend to be pretty big spaces in your overall view. It's hard to explain and stuff, but basically all you got to do is use smaller increments and then try different values and see how they work out for you. Now, in the inlets for part velocity, the inlets for this object, you see, they're actually hard to see. Oh, wait a minute. Let me go into edit mode. There you go. The middle one is for the domain, which is, in this case, a sphere. And the right one is a message you send with the coordinates and information that really is based on whatever domain you're using. Now, for a sphere, you want to set x, y, z coordinates for the center of the sphere, and then a number for its radius. If we were set to send to this, let's make a message box here. This is still kind of review, but I think I'm explaining things a little bit better than I did last time. So let's keep our general shape of the sphere the same and make its radius 0.5 instead. So we should see, now the particles are still going to radiate outwards, but we're going to see them kind of die off a little bit earlier than they are now. Come on. Connect up. There we go. So let's zoom out and see that. What? Well, actually, I think I got to revise what my view on radius is. I was thinking radius as in the distance from the center to the outside of the sphere, which is basically what it is. But in this case, it looks to be narrowing kind of like a cone shape of going out to the outside of the sphere. It seems to be more like the radius of the spread. Interesting. Or the velocity is saying, hey, our sphere is here, our source sphere is here, our destination sphere is here, and how wide is the radius of that sphere? And I guess the reason why we're getting some particles occurring below, well, we still are, they're just going a shorter distance. But most of them are going upwards towards the Y location. I have found with dealing with these particles that it's probably like particles in quantum physics. They behave strangely, and what we're trying to do is just kind of coax them into things. But in many ways, it makes a lot of beautiful things happen. So let me move on. Here we have kill old, which is basically particles, even though they are kind of like supposed to be thought of as particles, as they radiate outwards, they do form a line by default. Now, there's a ways of changing that, and we'll be doing more and more of that as we go on. But they go out, it's kind of like a line created by a particle. And kill old is when that particle dies off, basically, and is removed from the system. And I've played with the settings of kill old a lot, and I think it can be very useful for creating different formulations of it. But I haven't totally figured out how the effects are exactly. Like, for example, let's go to 10. We started at 5. Now we're supposed to be killing off 10 particles per frame. And now let's go to 15. And we get kind of like a stuttering or a periodic thing there. So it's almost like, okay, it's not consistently killing off 15 particles per frame. It seems to be periodically eliminating them, or maybe it gets to a certain amount of particles that die off that, you see things kind of stop for a bit. But the number that we're generating is 42. Let's put at 50 here. Have a round value, why not? Now it seems to be kind of like flickering on and off a little more often. So I'm thinking, 15 can't be 15 milliseconds for kill old. It's got to be number of particles in them some way. Let's make the numbers the same. So let's put 50 for kill old. And now you see we have nothing. But we do have something there briefly for a moment, and then nothing for a bit. I think a lot of it has to deal with, and this is why I call it exploring multimedia art with Pd-L2Ork, because you look at the documentation, and actually the documentation in the help browser for Pd-L2Ork on particles for GEM doesn't have a lot of writing in it. A lot of examples, but not writing. And when you open up the help for these, what I see happening is not completely explained by the amount of text here. Like, here's a help for kill old. No real example, just shows you what it's fed. And read it yourself and tell me if you have any better clue on this. Now, the colors changed because I just opened this up and that's affected it. So now we're back to what we were at. Okay, so, but it's something you can definitely play with. Let's put it back to 5. 10. Something you could play with. Find some ranges. 15. There we go. How about 12? Find some ranges that you like, and eventually you can say, "Oh, I dig that." It's one of those things. And then I have a load bang on here making the color range for the whole particle system arranged between green and blue. So some are green, some are blue, and different shades. Like the blue has variation since it's a min-max range. The minimum is 1 green and 0 blue. So that's at the bottom of the range. So you're always going to get full green. And then blue does vary in darkness, it seems, because, it can range from 0 to 1. When I make green 0 to 1, I unfortunately, if I put it at 0 here, we don't get green. And then if I put it at 0.1, a lot of the greens can be a little bit too dark and so forth. So, you got to play with these a bit and see what values are good for you. If you want some red color channel in there, you can basically put that at 1. If you want a full color range, it could be 0, 0, 0 here and then 1, 1, 1 here. And then you will get a full, almost rainbow-like color range. I don't know if I want to try that, though. I'm happy with what I got there. And then I have a low bang setting the initial line value here of drawing the line at 1. You could either put in line or points, where it's like either the particles are expressed as points, or you could express them as line, which is the default. You don't have to do anything to get that. But then here you kind of get a bit of the formation of the line is changed here if you put different values in here. Showed you this last time too. Kind of makes them like have two-dimensionality to them. They're no longer just a one-dimensional line. They now seem to be two-dimensional. So I have a feeling this is somewhat dimensional. Although, as you'll see, 3, I guess that could be 3-dimensional. It's kind of hard for us to see with our radius. Maybe we can expand our radius here. Of course, what I've been doing all along, and maybe I should touch on this, is for a lot of these values, I put in $1 here in the number box above. So let's do that. Let's put a $1 there, number box above. Now, for the radius, I think we should multiply that by 0.01. Just so when you're scrolling through the number box, you do get a better control over it. It's not jumping from values too quickly, because pretty much the useful range here is like a decimal point number up to maybe 2 or 3 for a visually pleasing thing. And then just to show you what I've been doing here, if you like to have some initial value that it starts at, and then you have the number box there to change it. Let's start it at, now we have to do something like 500. Okay, let me do this. Let me make this 50. Hold on. An object box? Come on. All right. We want to select this so we can delete it. delete. There we go. We want a message box, and actually I'm going to make it the multiplier different. I'll make it 0.1. I've just had a brief change of heart here, or sudden change of heart here. And of course you can grab these objects to line them up with the arrow keys. I've been happy since I found that feature. And yeah, let's make it 0.1. So as you scroll over, it doesn't take long scrolling to change values. So as you'll see here, if we want the initial default value we were using, we got to put in 50, which we can do here like that. Although 50 times 0.1 should be 0.5. Our radius is looking bigger than the 0.5 that I had put in before. Let me double check this. 50 times 0.1. Maybe 0.01 is a good idea. Let's see what this does. Okay, yeah, maybe it was 0.05. At least that seems to be what's working out good here. I mean, you got to play around with value ranges and see what the ranges are of what you're doing. And then now let's scroll through this. So it's going to start below 50, which means when you multiply it, it's going to be a lower value to start. But as we scroll up, here we can control our radius more of that sphere. How about something like that? That looks cool. There we go. And so I've been going through this here. The line properties, so to speak. What happens when we go to 4-dimensional? Well, then it gets thicker. Go to 5-dimensional, maybe a little bit thicker, although I don't see a huge difference. 6, yeah, that is thicker. 7, we get there. It's starting to get thinner again. 8, then 9, and then that's probably super thick. 10, and what we've got now is it's almost like we went back to really more like 2, not 1. But let's put in like 12. You see it's thick again. So these values can be pretty experiment. And 14, look at that. We get points. 15, 20. Yeah. All right. As you see, the numbers just take experimentation, I would say. Let's go to 4 or 3. How about that? There we go. So we're going to go with that. Now let's get on to the new stuff. So that was kind of like more of a consolidation of some stuff that we've been through. And to do some new stuff, we're going to add gravity to the equation here. Now what we can do to do that is I'm going to take this stuff and move it down. I like to put gravity, and that's the part gravity object, somewhere here. I'm going to stop things. We're not even looking at them since we're zoomed in anyway. Just to disconnect this, although you don't necessarily have to do that. I just like it. Being kinder to Gem, turning it off when you dismantle it. Okay, so we're going to do part gravity. Now this pretty much has X, Y, Z coordinates. It's kind of like creating a point of gravity to affect the flow of particles. Their velocity is sending them upward to the coordinate of 1 on the y-axis, which is up in here. It's actually probably more like here, but that's kind of like where they're being sent. But you can add gravity that then starts pulling them another direction. And there really seems to be calculations of some force involved, because you'll see in a moment how this works. Let's have it pull it down the opposite direction to 0 in the x-axis -1 in the y-axis, 0 in the z-axis. And there's no radius afterwards because we're not making a sphere domain. This is purely a XYZ coordinate location of like a point to say this is where gravity's going. Okay, so we're going to see the result of that. Although afterwards, what we can do is send some other messages. So I'm actually going to set that up now, just to show you. Let's say, for example, let's say we want to rotate this around like where this point is. Well, we're not going to be able to really rotate it unless we do a bunch of other things. But first of all, we need a message box. Oh, and that's what we had. So we can do X coordinates, Y coordinates, or Z coordinates, which is kind of like backwards and forwards. Let's do that. We haven't done anything with the Z coordinates so far. So let's do 0, 0, and then I'll put $1 here. Now to save a little time, I'm going to use the same system that we've been using for kind of like giving us a better range of values for scrolling. Yeah, just so I can fit more in, I'm going to move it over here. And basically, since $1 is in the position of the z-axis, we'll be moving this thing to and from us, backwards and forwards, basically. So first thing, go into run mode, turn on gemhead. Now you can see already my default creation argument is already in there, -1. You see things kind of going up at first, but then pulling down this direction. And so that's why we're now seeing our particles going downward. Let us zoom this in and out, basically, is what it should end up being like. As I scroll upward on the number box, it at first seemed like it was going out. Here, let's type in some numbers. In our number box, since we're multiplying by 0.01, let's put 100. There we go. Let's put 200. Now remember, this is gravity, so that's why it's going upwards now a little bit, although this is supposed to be z-axis, right? Yeah. Oh, I know. It's kind of going upwards now because we also changed the gravity from what we had as -1. Let's put that back in. And we'll put the z-axis at 100, which multiplied by 0.01 will make it 1. There we go. Kind of going downward now. Let's do 200. It seems like we're further out from it. 300. Yep. 400. 500. Now these distances, yeah, I went to 1,000. Well, I thought I did. 1, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. These distances seem like the number ranges don't need to be as pared down as I did, probably because the particles flow out pretty far before they get killed off. Let's try 2,000 there. 5,000. Okay. We seem to be hitting kind of like a wall there. So let me put this on -200. That should bring it. Oh, I'm telling you, I cannot predict what's going to happen with this stuff, but in many ways that can be good for creativity. Sometimes you do want control. Now this seems to really be putting it further and further away from us. I guess the shape of the overall system was kind of hard to see from being as close as we were to it, maybe. But now that that's further away, can we vary our value here, our gravity value, to maybe something like -3? Let's see what happens there. Now, that change that I just made won't take place until I actually do something here. So let me say -500 here. And the -3 in the y-axis didn't seem to make a big difference, but our z-axis is so far away. Let's zero it out. Yeah, 0 is 0 is 0, folks. Oh, I have a typo here. Look, see what I did? I forgot the space here. So, yeah, that was screwing up everything. So all the values we were putting in ever since I made that mistake have been errors. Put in 500, 0. Oh, come on here. I'm going to just type some values here and see what happens. 0, -3. Of course, I had 2 negative signs there, didn't I? Yeah, all right, never mind. That would explain it. Oh, screwing up. All right, there we go. Yeah, definitely we're being pulled down further, and we're at a z-coordinate of 0, so that means right up front. So let me drag this downwards, and hopefully we'd be zooming out. And we are. And actually scrolling on this is actually giving me a good range here. Look at that. I can move in and out pretty well. And if we were to expand the radius up here, and let us zoom out a little further from this. That's pretty cool. Okay, so that's gravity. And maybe actually instead of messing with the z coordinates here, I'm going to change this to 0 and put the $1 here. So what we're doing instead is altering the y coordinates. So let's do this. And so as we change this here, let's put it at 0 just to see a starting point. That's what we're at. The gravity is not really pulling it downward. It's pulling it right towards the source. So we're not going down at all. Now, if we go up, there we go. And if we go down, things start getting pulled down. Although a z coordinate of something like say, oh, I deleted the whole message box. All right, let's say 0, $1, and let's put a z coordinate of something like -5. Remember, we're no longer, at least that z coordinate is not being multiplied by 0.1. So let's see if we can get ourselves zoomed out from this thing a bit. Let's put the default in. So we could kind of see as we scroll through this y coordinate, we can see the shape from a distance. When we're too close to it on the z-axis, harder to see what's going on. Now as I'm scrolling up and down, I could definitely see gravity working things towards that location. Now if we go to line, and just make it regular old line here, we see it as something that are a little bit more like streams. I'm expanding the radius. Now I'm contracting the radius. Okay. So let's add a little more fun to this. I am going to, at this point, put in something called a separator. So we have gravity here. And what I'm going to do is keep that as one option for this particle system to do. But I am going to use a separator so I can actually make two things happen. Now that's introducing another concept, but might as well. Let's put separator here. Separator only has one inlet. It's not something that actually separates things. It just means this part of the list is a different branch. It's its own branch, basically. Now, let me zoom out here. Yeah, we got our thing as we've made it. Now I'm going to put a separator here so that we can have another branch. Can you please hook up for me? There we go. I'm going to move this straight so it looks nice. And up there. And then we're going to create an object, part orbit. And then what you could put in as creation arguments is kind of like a point. And I think these are just X, Y, if I remember correctly. X, Y coordinates for where it orbits, or maybe they are X, Y, Z. Well, let's see. I'm going to create an orbiting point to the left. We'll say -1 for X. Y we'll put centralized as 0 and Z at 0. Although I should look at the help there and see what's going on. Now we're not going to see anything. I must have a typo. PART_ORBIT. Yep, space. It doesn't like it. Oh, come on. Hold on here. Maybe I was right. Something in my memory told me that. Weird, it only had an XY. No, that's not it. Part_orbit. Point. Now you saw orbit in the list. That's because I had made the object and it added it to the list. Let me see if I can get rid of that. That's a feature of Pd-L2Ork that sometimes I could do without. I think it's Alt. Oh, I don't remember. Alt X. Alt X again. I think it's something you got to do twice. I'll have to look it up, but there is an Alt command that you can remove that from the autofill list. But orbit, that did work. Alt X did it. You see, part orbit is no longer an option there. Okay, and then -1, 0, 0. Let's go with the XYZ because I'm pretty for some reason my memory it was like saying it was only an XY. It was strange, but no, that's got to be wrong. That wouldn't make sense. Okay, so we have that there. We're not going to see anything yet because we haven't gotten to the point where it's getting drawn. So what I'm going to do is, at this point, I am going to put something different because remember, we're also going to talk about render. You could do a part render. No creation argument necessary. And then after that, what do you want to render your particles to? Let's render them to spheres with a radius of 0.2, which will make them small little balls. And I believe I need to hook something up here. Okay, look at that. We're getting our spheres as well as what we had before because of separator. So these are being rendered. Now, this part orbit does not seem to be creating much of an orbit where I'd like it to. Let me just look up this help file real quick. XYZ, you got to give it a gravity amount. And it is XYZ, so I was off base there when I was thinking somehow my memory. Oh, memory is wrong. Yep, we need a gravity amount. And what we're going to do for that, again, is just copy this stuff over here. Or actually up here because it's just one value. We're going to change out the word speed here in this message box for gravity. But then we'll have a gravity value that we can send to it and control. Oh boy, I copied too much stuff. Get rid of the gem head. We'll leave the load bang in so that this patch in the future can have an initial value to start off with. Oh, I put this stuff here. It's supposed to be below orbit. No. Using the arrow keys to move objects around. Render doesn't need anything above it. Although I will look at its help file real quick just to see if there are any special attributes that can be given to it. But orbit point in its second inlet, it can receive coordinate information, which we might want to play with a little bit. So there we go. Now, the gravity is the amount at which you're pulling stuff. Since we are multiplying by 0.01 here, I'm going to put in, let's say 1,000. Or no, 100, which would be a gravity of 1. That didn't do much. Let's try 200. That's not doing much either. Let's scroll up on this. I would expect to see some of these spheres start going off to the left here. Try 500. Let's try 1,000. Well, that was 10,000. I'm almost like 5,000. Okay, I actually did do this before, and we're not getting the same effect I was getting before. 10,000. Because it is not moving off to this x coordinate at all. Well, I'm sending it a message that says speed. That could have something to do with it. It doesn't receive a speed message. So let's go back to 100. Okay, so that would be a gravity of 1. Let's scroll up on this box. Come on. I want to make sure I am scrolling on it right. I think maybe this is one time where I can multiply by 0.1. Let's try 2,000. 3,000. 5,000. Okay, I am going to just break down here and say, okay, gravity, 5. Or perhaps it is just a number box without a message. Okay, yeah. There we go, folks. Now, we're not getting the, let's put a gravity of 5 there. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're basically giving it an orbit point, and the gravity is the amount of gravity that orbit point has. The orbit point should be out over here. And you see some of the balls are moving that way. Those would be the only things that would move because they're the ones that respond to gravity. So it is not a message. Definitely doesn't say speed, and it definitely does, and it doesn't say gravity either. Try 20. Now this may also be affected by your source and your velocity. This is something where, yeah, definitely I don't need to multiply by 0.01. Look at that. Yeah, it is definitely seems to be creating more of an orbiting area over here. Let me slow down my speed here a little bit. That's up here. Ooh, that stopped it. Let's just move a little bit here. Now, let's change our source. Now, you see how the lines are, since there's a separation here in the list, the lines are radiating outwards. I'm not seeing the gravity as heavy on them anymore. Put that back down at 20. Let's put kill old at 5 or something like that. But you definitely do see that the spheres are orbiting. And what we can do, let's move this down. Here, like this. Let's add a little bit of control over where the I will put a load bang here so that I can create a default value. Now this is going to be multiplied by 1,000 because these coordinate values do work this way. Let's say the initial value will be 1,000. And what we're going to do is put in a message. Oh, no, I didn't mean that. Cancel. We're going to put in Well, let's put a number box so we can change values.